Hi guys, it's Stuart from Mr. Teeb's Primary History here with another home learning pack. This time we're going to be looking at a very significant anniversary that's coming up soon, and that's the 75th anniversary of VE Day. As part of this, we're going to be looking at what is VE Day, when did it happen, what happened on the day itself, and why should we remember it. So, let's have a look and get started. So, what is VE Day? It means Victory in Europe Day. Now, victory is where you win something, and Europe is a continent, a place in which Britain is a part. It was the end of the Second World War in Europe. The war had lasted for 6 years, and people in lots of countries around the world had been affected by it. It was marked with celebrations, street parties, but also some sadness. Now let's have a think about when did it happen in history. It happened on the 8th of May 1945, but what does that really mean? Well, let's use a timeline and have a look. We need to start with now. Now's really important. It's today, as in right now. And then we're going to have a look at two ideas for our chronology. The first is living memory. Now, living memory is all the things that have happened that can be remembered by people. If you notice, now is included in living memory. It's part of it. When we look further in the past, we come to a new concept. That's called beyond living memory. That can't be remembered by people today because it's too far in the past. Which of these ideas is longer? Which has the longest duration? If you said beyond living memory, you're absolutely right. Can you see it's got an arrow at the end of it? That's because it keeps going. The only reason it stops there is because I've run out of screen. It would actually go off the edge of the screen, round the room, through the door, down the stairs and outside. I wonder where VE Day fits within this. Let's have a look. So VE Day is part of living memory, so there are people alive today that can remember it happening. But it's quite near the end of living memory, so I wonder which people it will be. We also need to think about where does VE Day fit with the other things we've learned about in history. Now I'm going to show you two important events in history that quite a lot of children learn about in school, but don't worry if you haven't. There's the Great Fire of London and the First Flight. Now let's start with today, that's now, and work backwards. Closest to today is VE Day. And then, about 45 years earlier than that, is the First Flight. But it is still beyond living memory. And then much further in the past is the Great Fire of London. That's the furthest away from today. Let's think about it in a different way. On the next slide, I'm going to show you another timeline. Now, we need to imagine that we've got a magnifying glass out and we've zoomed in on this timeline. Let's have a look and see what we notice. What can you notice about this timeline? Living memory is much longer this time, isn't it? Does that mean it's longer than beyond living memory? Not at all. It just means we've zoomed in. And notice the arrow is still on beyond living memory because it does keep going. Off the monitor, round the wall, through the door, down the stairs and out the front door. That's how long the duration of time that would be. VE Day still marks in living memory because it is. But before we have a look at it in a different way, we need to remember to add on now. Now is the end of the timeline because it's happening right now. I'm going to explain to you living memory using the idea of a family. Now, this is a made-up family, and yours might be similar or it might be different. This is just an example, don't worry about it too much if yours is different. So let's think. Living memory is what can be remembered by people that are alive. I wonder who will have the longest living memory. Think about your family. In this family, it's their great-grandparents. Their living memory is very long indeed because they've been alive a long time. Their children are now the grandparents. they still have quite a long living memory as well, because they've been alive for quite a long time, but not as long as the great-grandparents. And then there's the parents. Now the parents have a shorter living memory again, because they're not as old. And then finally, the child's living memory. Can you see how the living memory is shorter each time? Because the older you are, the longer your living memory is. VE Day can't be remembered by everyone because not everyone was there. Have a quick look. Pause the video if you like. Which group of people from this made-up family would remember VE Day happening? If you said great-grandparents, you're absolutely right. So, now that we understand where in history it is, let's have a look at our inquiry question, because in history we use inquiry questions to help guide what we're learning, and history works best when we're finding out things based on questions that we want to know about. So this is our inquiry question for this lesson. How is VE Day remembered by those that were there? So that's what we're interested in, the people that were there. And we're going to look at this using three different things. Number one, sources of evidence. In history, we have to use sources of evidence to find out the answer. We'll have a look at those in just a second. We're also going to be asking lots of questions. Questions are really, really important because they help us find out answers, but they also help us find out more about something, because when we've answered the first question, we might want to ask a second question to help look a little bit deeper. And then at the end, we need to write a conclusion. Now, a conclusion is where we answer our overall inquiry question, and we can add in evidence that we find out that helps explain what we found. What you'll need is a piece of paper, a pen or a pencil, and you might have even printed off the worksheet that I've made and put up for you. So, let's get started with our inquiry. Okie doke. So, the first thing we're going to have a look at is what happened on the day itself. We're going to do this by looking at sources of evidence to help us find out what happened. Now, I've got a photograph for us to look at, but if you want to find out more, you can look on the internet, as there are lots of photographs of VE Day itself. We're also going to have a look at some people's experience. Now, this one is from my grandma, so it's from my family, but I wonder if any of your family remember it happening. The aim of this is to find some similarities and differences. If you've managed to print off the worksheet that I've made for you, then you can use a table on there. But if not, don't worry, just have a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper. You can either draw yourself a table or just write the words similar and difference and write yourself some ideas down under each. If you want to go and grab one of those now, pause the video and then we can carry on and get started. So, here is the first source of evidence. It's a photograph. This photograph was taken in the East End of London on VE Day itself. So that's the 8th of May 1945. What I want you to do is pause the video here and just take a minute or so looking at it. What do you notice about it? What stands out in this photograph? Look at the front, look at the middle and the back, look at the sides as well. Pause the video here and have a look. Then I'm going to show you some of the things that jumped out to me and we'll have a bit of a discussion about them. Okay, so now you've had a chance to look. Let's see what I've picked up on. I've put a box around the children at the front here. You can see a boy. He's got trousers with braces on. Now braces work in the same way as belts. I don't see many people wearing those today. I wonder if you do. He also has a hat on. If you look around the photo, lots of people have a similar hat on. I wonder if it's a special hat or maybe it was just fashionable. Because the baby next to her, the boy, also looks to have a similar hat on. The clothes look quite fancy as well. I wonder if they've dressed up specially. I've added another box on now. This one's orange. If you look in there, the lady's wearing a very nice dress. If you look really closely, you can see some jewellery on her wrist, and she's also got the same kind of hat on. Makes me think people dressed up specially because this was a really important event for them. One more box to have a look at. Look across the back there. There only looks to be a couple of men there. I wonder why. You can see lots of flags across the back of the photograph as well. I wonder if you recognise that flag. It's called the Union Jack, and it's the flag for our country, the United Kingdom. I wonder if everyone's experience of VE Day was the same. Now, my grandma was alive during the war and she remembers VE Day. I gave her a call when I was thinking about this, and what I'm going to read to you now is what she said. As you listen, try and find any similarities and differences from the photo to what she says. Now, don't worry if you can't keep up, because I've given you a copy of what she says, and I'll also show you the photograph in it again, and you can pause the video to compare the two. So let's see what she said. So this is Grandma's memory of VE Day. To us as a family, we had no one really involved in the war, apart from a cousin in the Air Force, who was in Britain still, so he didn't travel and fight in another country. From nowhere, Union Jack flags appeared and were everywhere. Oh, I think we saw Union Jack flags in the photograph as well. I remember my dad took us around Selby, that's where she lived, it's a town in Yorkshire, with my sister to make sure we remembered what the day was like, because we hadn't seen anything like it before. No one seemed to know where they all came from. She meant the flags there. We managed to buy a little one to wave, and my dad was mortified, that means really embarrassed or ashamed, because it was made in Japan. Now remember, the war in the Pacific was still going on, so Britain was still fighting Japan. We tied it onto our bikes. Why don't you pause the video here and write down any similarities and differences you've been able to find. This is paragraph 2 now. For the party, everyone on the street had to give up coupons. They're vouchers used for rations, and you still might see those today. They might get a gift voucher for your birthday, or you might get a money off voucher to use in the shops, and had 2 shillings to help pay for it. That's money. Also, everyone gave 2 teaspoons of tea and 2 teaspoons of sugar too, so that everyone could have tea to drink. When the party was about to start, everyone had to take out a chair and sheet to make a tablecloth. A poor family didn't have any, but neighbours brought out spares for them. They also let them join in, even though they couldn't afford to pay the 2 shillings people had contributed, because everyone was rallying together. That means everyone was coming together as a group to try and celebrate. There was a piano, singing, dancing, and an accordion. That's a type of musical instrument. I wonder if you can see any similarities and differences from the photo in that second paragraph. Pause the video here and jot them down if you found them. Then we'll carry on with the last paragraph. Here's the last paragraph. People that could bake made buns. There were sandwiches with either fish or meat paste in them, as there still wasn't much food about. It was the first real jollity, that's a cheerful celebration, we grew up with because I was a toddler when the war started. There were never any celebrations because of the blackout conditions. That's where you had to keep the curtains drawn and not let light be seen outside your house in case we were attacked. So now that you've seen both of our sources, that's the photograph and Grandma's memory, why don't you try and find those similarities and differences? You can use the table that I made for you, or you can just jot them down. Here's the photograph again, so pause the video here. You can rewind it to listen to me reading Grandma's memory, and you can look at the photograph as well. Once you've done that, we'll go through some things that I spotted. So, here's the photograph again. Pause the video here and have a look at the photo, and don't be afraid to rewind and listen to Grandma's account. Once you've done that, we'll have a look at the answers. So, how were they the same and different? Now, these are some of the answers that I've found, but you may have found others, and that's absolutely great. So how were they similar? Well, they both mentioned there was a street party. You could see tables and chairs on both of them. There were definitely lots of flags mentioned. Food was mentioned. The streets look the same. They're both what we call terraced houses. I wonder if there's any terraced houses near you. There are near me. That's where you have a road in the middle and houses on either side. But how are they different? The photo shows fancy clothes. Grandma doesn't mention those. Grandma's account mentions a poor family, but we can't tell that from the photo. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, it just means the photo doesn't show it. The type of food eaten isn't shown in the photo either. Maybe they took the photo before the food was eaten, or maybe it was afterwards. There was no musical instruments shown in the photo. I wonder why. That's why it's really important to have a couple of sources at least to be able to try and get a really full picture. So if you want to pause the video here and add some extras onto your ideas, please do. Then we'll have a think about our conclusion. So our conclusion. From what we've learned so far, do people remember it being a good day? Think about what Grandma said and think about how the people look in the photograph, because we can find things in different ways. I wonder if everyone felt the same about it. Think about what I said at the start, and it was the end of the war, so I wonder. And then, do you think it was the same experience for everyone? The photograph was from London, and my grandma lived in Selby, which is in Yorkshire. Not the same place at all, so maybe it was different. Doesn't make anyone wrong, it just means they saw different things and remember different things. Have a go at writing your conclusion to answer our inquiry question. Once you've done that, we'll have a think about how we should remember it today. So how should we remember VE Day? Well, lots of people fought and died in the war, and they were very brave. Now we should be brave today. It's a very different world we live in, but bravery is a really good thing. People at home had to deal with hard conditions because of the war too. Sometimes life is hard and we've got to be brave. And we've got to help each other. Think about what Grandma said about them helping that poorer family. That was really nice, wasn't it? It was a happy day because the war had ended, but people were sad because of the soldiers that didn't come home. Now there are lots of activities and ideas and videos that you'll see at the moment because this is an anniversary, and it's an important one. Whenever you do anything related to it though, make sure you remember what we now know about it. It was the end of the war. People celebrated the fact the war was over, but you've got to remember all of those people that fought in it as well. I hope you found that interesting, and I'd love to see you again soon.